Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Breadwinner Podcast. It's Caroline here, and I get to talk with you yet again about building a thriving microbakery business. This is the very first episode of the month, which means that this is going to be a recap of the previous month. So, this episode is January in review, and I am going to just kind of walk through my January, what went well, what didn't, what I learned, and what I'm doing as I look forward to the coming month. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Hopefully not get too long-winded as I share about January, but it was a very big month. I learned a lot. I started out really humble, and I'll tell all about that. Overall, it was a really good month. So I'll just jump right in. The month of January was one with 2 markets and 2 porch pickups. It is the very first month that I implemented my new rhythm. So previously, I had been doing a porch pickup every single Thursday, as well as a market on every second and fourth Saturday. That's the way that my local market operates, is just twice a month like that. And so I had been doing the market as well as trying to do a porch pickup on those market weeks. And it was a lot because my prep and bake days overlapped, and I was always limited on how much I could bring to the market because I was trying to do it concurrently with my porch pickup day. So I decided that moving forward in January and for the rest of the year, probably, I will be doing the market, and then on opposite weeks, I'll do porch pickup. So rather than doing like 6 bake days, I'm doing 4, just 1 a week. And so far, it feels a lot more manageable. And I'm really excited to see how it just kind of helps optimize everything. The other thing I've changed a little bit is offering pre-orders for pickup at the market, because that was one of the things that I was kind of iffy on. Is if I eliminated one of my pre-order weeks, one of my Thursday porch pickup, and didn't replace it with anything, would people be bummed out that they couldn't reserve their bread? And how would that work? So because the Simply Bread app rolled out a recent update that allowed me to be more clear on the description of my bake days, I was able to offer pre-orders for the Saturday pickups as well as my regular pre-orders for Thursdays. That has been really well received, and I've been really surprised at how many people have placed a pre-order, even as many as like 30 orders that people ordered for Saturday to pick up at the market. So my very first bake of January was a market day. And I was very ambitious. I went in knowing that January tends to be a little bit slow, but also feeling like I just kind of wanted to test the waters and see how people were feeling. And so I prepped a lot. I also am still in this stage of trying to figure out this balance for market weeks between offering enough for pre-orders and still having enough capacity to be able to bring up enough for just the regular walk-up customers. And so I still feel like I'm trying to figure that out. I've only had 2 weeks to practice. I had 2 markets in January to practice, and then this upcoming one. And I was closer the second time, but I think it'll just be something that I continue to tweak and hone and just sort of play it. Maybe I'll never know exactly. You just don't know if the weather's going to be absolutely stunningly gorgeous and everyone is out hiking and not shopping at markets, or if the weather's rainy and everyone's staying in, or the Super Bowl. Who knows what's going to happen with the Super Bowl. This episode is being recorded in the first week of February, and I don't know if people are going to stay in on the day before Super Bowl or come out and get their jalapeno cheese bread. I don't know. We'll see. I'll report back in a month when I review February. Anyway, so I'm trying to figure out that balance. I definitely overdid it for that very first Thursday. I pushed myself and I prepared more than my optimal capacity. So I know really well kind of what my capacity is in terms of like how much I can put in my mixer at a time, how many loaves of bread I can hold at a time, how much I can fit in my fridge. I go a lot deeper on this in episode 45, where I talk about understanding your capacity. So if you want to hear more about that, just backtrack a little to episode 45. But I definitely pushed it. I know my limits. And I wanted to see just how far I could take it, but I prepped things like too much sandwich bread. My capacity for sandwich bread is 24 loaves. That's how many loaf pans I have. And that resulted in me overproofing because I was trying to cool it in bins instead of shaping and cold proofing in my loaf pans like I normally do. So those loaves came out really, really heavy and dense. They were very overproofed, like probably the most overproofed I've ever made. So I just had to issue some humble apologies and explanations. A lot of those were pre-sold. So I had to say to my customers, this is not the bread you're used to. It's going to taste fine. And I still wanted to bring a product for you, but let me know what you think and I'd be happy to replace it next week. Everyone was super gracious, super kind and understanding. A lot of them were like, whatever, it's bread. One person did come back and she was like, you were right. It was really dense and we couldn't really make it through the full loaf. So I was like, well, grab a loaf off the table, please. Take one home. I did send her a coupon code too. I want to love on my customers, even if they're not asking for something in return. If they had an experience with a product that doesn't meet my standard, and I know up front, I'm going to tell them, like, I'm getting ahead of myself just a little bit. But another issue I had with that first bake day is my cookies baked really flat. I don't know. My mixing method was a little bit different from normal. I did a really big batch and tried to mix them by hand. I don't know if that's why, but they came out really flat, so flat that I couldn't sell them. And so some of those were pre-sold, and I had to say to my customers, I couldn't sell the cookies this week. I'm really sorry, but I will replace them. I can deliver a replacement to you tomorrow. And I offered them a few alternatives. One lady just took some other bread instead from my table at the market, and we called it even. But I'm always, if it's not up to standard, I'm going to explain without too much detail, not in an apologetic way, but just saying, hey, this didn't meet my standard. I want you to have the best. I can't sell it this week, but here are the options instead. It doesn't happen very often, but it's always received really well when it does. And so I did have to make a couple of those explanations that very first week of January. So backtracking to going above my capacity a little bit. So this was just a very humbling experience. Another thing that went wrong is I have a brand new fridge here. I bought it in December. And I'm still figuring it out. I'm not sure if it's a fridge issue or if it's a me issue, but I have noticed some temperature fluctuations. And so one of those fluctuations led to it being too warm in there. And so a lot of my original loaves overproofed and they still were bakeable, edible. They were flat though. I think I had about 10 really, really flat loaves that were just really sad. And so what I did, because I didn't want to throw away 10 loaves that were perfectly edible, I put them in a basket and labeled them flat but yummy and discounted them, and they went so fast. People loved it, and they bought them really quickly. So all was not lost. Is it a lesson I would have preferred not to learn? Yes. But it happens. So those loaves were overproofed, the cookies baked flat. This makes me want to do a deep dive into the science of cookies and the mixing process and how that affects the way they bake, because I think the only variable that changed was the way that I mixed them. I didn't use the stand mixer to mix up the butter and the eggs and the sugar. So if you are a food scientist and can shed some light or know of a food scientist or a great book for me to read, let me know. The last thing that was just a really big learning lesson, fail. I hesitate to say fail because I learned and improved, but it did not go well. I mixed up 24 loaves of focaccia, again, over my capacity. My capacity for focaccia is 16. But I mixed up all of those loaves of focaccia, and then I proofed them overnight and went to bake them, and I realized the dough was just extremely sticky. And so I started to think through, and I realized that when I had pre-measured the ingredients, I was still waiting on my restock of salt to be delivered. You may have seen me share about this on Instagram. And it hadn't been there, so I just put the flour in the bin, knowing that I would add the salt later, but I didn't make a note of it. And so I mixed up the focaccia the next day, but I totally forgot to add the salt because normally it would be in the bin with the flour. Did the whole thing, cold proofed them in the fridge overnight, shaped them, room temp proofed them overnight. They were puffy, they were ready in the morning, but they were not right. The dough was sticky, they were terrible. And I realized it was because I forgot the salt. And this was not a salvageable mistake, unfortunately. Sometimes you can kind of go back and fix it. If I had caught it a lot earlier, I would have tried to remix the dough up with the salt. This just wasn't possible. It wasn't in the cards. So I had to toss 24 loaves of focaccia, which hurt my heart. But I learned a lot. And so the way I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen again is keeping a running list of things that need to be restocked up on the fridge and making sure to reorder before I'm going to run out, well before, so that I don't get to the point where I just have zero salt left. And then secondly, I pulled out a roll of bright yellow tape. You can, if you're on YouTube, you can see it hanging from a hook on the shelf behind me. And my assistant and I will use that anytime there is something out of the ordinary in a process, like the salt is not in the bin where it usually would be. We'll label it on the bin or label it with that yellow tape so that I know if something is different and I don't make a mistake like that again, because that was the problem. I waited too long to reorder the salt and I didn't make a note for myself to add it to the flour. Lessons learned the hard way, won't happen again, but that's what I have implemented. I don't know if you can really see it on YouTube, but I have some magnetic dry erase sheets up on my fridge now. They're easy to move around, they're flexible, and I just have like one for my to-do list, one for my assistant's to-do list, one for the menu of the week, and then a corner for restocks and just a running list of items that need to be reordered or replaced in the next Costco order or whatever. Overall, that market did end up on a happy note. Even though I pushed myself too far and it backfired, I ended up bringing 101 loaves of bread to the market, and I sold 100 of them, which meant that I got to bring one loaf home with me for my sandwich. And so it worked out beautifully. It was kind of a happy ending. Could I have had more revenue if I hadn't lost all of that product? Yes. If I hadn't had to discount those loaves of bread, if I hadn't had to throw away the focaccia, if the cookies hadn't baked flat, yes, I would have had quite a bit more revenue. But I hopefully won't have such a series of unfortunate events like I did. Now on to the following week, the next porch pickup. It was a big one too. I decided to add more variety to the pre-order menu. And so I added English muffins, which are always a really hot commodity. I added some bread bowls. I don't love making bread bowls because they are the same amount of effort for just a much smaller loaf of bread. And I can't bake as many in my oven at a time. And so I tweaked a little bit. Last year, I was underpricing on the bread bowls. And so this year, the change that I made was to keep the price the same, but to do one fewer bread bowls. So it ends up that they're priced fairly. They are priced enough to make up for my extra labor, but not dramatically more than regular bread. I also added some scones and some cinnamon rolls. I don't normally do cinnamon rolls, especially the second week in January, but someone had messaged and asked for them. And so I was like, I guess we'll just add 4 on the menu. And they went super fast. Again, it always blows me away. I just did a really small quantity and they sold like hotcakes. So that was fun. All of those items, English muffins, scones, cinnamon rolls, those are things that increase my average order value significantly. Anytime those are on the menu, especially English muffins or cinnamon rolls, that's just a much larger revenue week. And so that was a real good porch pickup. I was curious that week, tracked my time on one of those dry erase sheets. I just kind of kept track of the hours that I worked. And I worked 16 hours, including a supply run. So including driving 30 minutes each way and going through Restaurant Depot to get some of my ingredients, and including the time that I spent in the evening before bake day to prep my starter. So 16 hours for that porch pickup week. And I was pleased by that. I do know that I work significantly more on market weeks because I have 2 prep days, a bake day, and then market day. So 4 days, I probably work a lot closer to somewhere between 30 and 40 hours. I'm going to track it this week because I'm curious. But 16 hours for that porch pickup week. Now, I will say I have an assistant now. And so she saved a lot of time for me by doing things like pre-measuring some ingredients, washing dishes, packaging, things like that, that I would have been hustling and working a lot more, makes investing in her so worthwhile. My hours would have been much, much higher. And if I had tracked my hours last year before hiring her, I certainly would have been well over 20 hours rather than 16. So if you're debating, or if you're at the point where you're like, I really kind of need help, or your toddlers are hanging on your legs, it might be a good time to consider what it could look like to bring in help for even 4 or 5 hours a week. Even if it's someone, a high school girl, to sit on the floor and hang out with your babies while you just push through some work for a few hours. It could really pay off and free you up to create more variety, or just a higher volume, or just have some breathing space, just some peace of mind. Even if you're not pushing yourself to expand what you're offering, it could just lower your stress. One of the benefits of having those 2 prep days now before the market, rather than trying to combine everything into one day when I was doing it with the market and the porch pickups, it means that I can expand my menu just a little bit. Now, this is something you want to walk carefully. I don't want to expand so much that it's decision paralysis, or people get confused on what I actually have, or I don't continue to bring back favorites and regulars. But there are things like pizza crusts and brownies that I usually don't have time to do. But last week, or the last market, because I had Melissa's help and because I kind of had prepped some things ahead, I was able to bring some pizza crust for the first time. I was curious to see how those would do. I brought some brownies. Both were extremely popular and went really fast. And that's the way I like to test a new product, is to just bring a small amount and see how they do. And if they sort of linger and people aren't sure, then maybe I'll try them again, or maybe I'll just shelve that idea and try something else. But the pizza crust and the brownies went so fast, and so I'm excited to continue to bring those. So that second market, I reined in my menu just a little bit. I got more kind of in line with my capacity and what I know I can comfortably bake and prepare. So I kept my bread at my capacity, but then supplemented, like I said, with some other things like the pizza crusts and the brownies. That was a great week. I sold out with about 2 hours to spare, which is interesting because January is historically a very, very slow month for most retail industries. Bakeries are no exception. And also, it was a little bit chilly too, so I just wasn't sure what to expect. I stood there shivering, trying to hold my coffee and stay warm the whole time. But everyone showed up. Our regulars showed up, and then new customers came through, and they were ready to buy their bread. So I am optimistic and excited for this coming market week to see how this one goes too, because as we're moving out of January, we're going to start to see an uptick in general. And so I'm really excited. Finally, the last porch pickup, I scaled back a little bit because I had to tweak my schedule because I had an opportunity to attend a 2-day women's business retreat, which meant that I had to shuffle my prep schedule around, and I just had limited time. But what I found was that what I did offer was perfect. It felt so smooth as far as the prep and then the bake day itself. Sometimes I'm hustling a little bit. Sometimes I'm waking up just insanely early. But this one, I was able to sleep until 4. Normally, I would have been waking up between 3 and 3:30. And I had everything baked and mostly cooled by the time Melissa came at 9 to help me get everything packaged and out on the porch by 11. And it just felt really, really smooth. So that was helpful to see, kind of like, that is the sweet spot in terms of porch pickup. And I'll probably duplicate that order and just add one more flavored loaf. This one I had some muffins, regular bread, bread bowls, sandwich bread, focaccia, cookies, and just one flavored rustic loaf. So moving forward, I think I'll do 2, a sweet and a savory, and then offer some variation, whether I swap out muffins for scones, but some variation of that combination, because that worked really well and felt really smooth. So overall, January, I learned so much. I started out very humble, which I think was exactly what I needed. Not that I was getting too big for my britches, but I think it was just a really good reminder that I want to be an expert. And to be an expert and to be a leader and to continue to grow in my craft, I need to learn the hard way, but the next step of learning the hard way is implementing systems to not repeat those mistakes, to improve based on the mistakes rather than just get beat down and frustrated and discouraged. And so I think starting January out with that kind of narrative in my mind and just sort of meditating on that idea of like, how do I become an expert? How do I continue to become just the best baker, the best business owner that I can possibly be? And the clear kind of next step for that was just to continue to make really great systems and to continue to improve. And so I hope this is clear to you that I am not like, there's no point of arrival. I am not an expert, but I am learning and improving and taking all of those fails or those missteps, those blunders as opportunities to just get better and better and better. And hopefully the way that I talk through that helps you kind of think through the way that you can implement the same sort of strategies and mindset in your own business. So back to January, just wrapping things up with a bow. So I learned so much. I also had some really cool opportunities to connect with other business owners. So I got to teach a workshop to my local community of women business owners, and I got to attend that business retreat. And so I'm feeling really solid, grounded, but also really motivated to just continue to grow and improve and hone my processes and just become more and more of an expert with each passing month. So as I look forward to February, I see myself increasing my variety and volume within reasonable boundaries at markets. So my new schedule is going to help with that. And then I really want to be more active in the community. And so I do plan to join the local Chamber of Commerce just to kind of continue to be more plugged in. I'm exploring some opportunities for growth that may take shape in the next few months. And I want to become more and more plugged in and serve the community in a more intentional way so that I can kind of position myself as the go-to sourdough bakery in my immediate area. So much to think about, so much to kind of meditate on and work on. I feel like there's always a balance of wanting to do everything and knowing what to say yes to in a certain season and what to say no, not right now, or no, not at all. And so I'm just kind of trying to use my energy wisely. I have a lot of plates in the air right now. And so using all of my time, energy, and then making sure that I have enough for my family is always going to be the tricky thing to navigate. I don't feel guilt about growing my business, but I do feel like I don't want to be sucked into my phone and answering emails or researching things at all hours of every day. And so I am actively working on creating stronger boundaries. When my kids are around, trying to unplug and be more present with them. It's a constant battle, constantly learning and slipping up, but it's just improving one step after the next. I would love to hear what you learned in January. What went well? What didn't? What are you doing to improve? If you're watching on YouTube, comment down below and let me know. If you're not, if you are listening on a podcast app, take a screenshot of the show. Let me know what you learned in January and put it up on Instagram. Last month, I sent coffee to 5 listeners who put it up on Instagram. And I think, why not do the same thing this month? If you're listening to this after the fact, I'm sorry, but I think I'll continue to do this each month for my month in review episode. So come on back in February and take a screenshot. Let me know what you learned. And I'll pick 5 random listeners to send some Venmo coffee money to, or tea, whatever floats your boat. As always, if you haven't left a review for the episode, it means the world to me when you take the time to do that. Hit rate to let us know how the show is serving you, but also some kind words or some words on how the show has helped you can help other people decide whether or not the show would benefit them. Hit follow, make sure you're not going to miss an episode. They drop every Monday and Thursday. And of course, I will be back very soon with another one. But until then, happy baking.